Today we're making sourdough pretzel rolls. These pretzel rolls are really delicious. We're making them for our Thanksgiving meal. This is what we're going to use instead of, not replacing, but as a substitution for a traditional yeast roll, we will be having these sourdough pretzel rolls. I'm having a hard time saying that tonight. Sourdough pretzel rolls in place of the yeast rolls for our Thanksgiving meal. These are ones that Ryan has been requesting, my husband, and so we're gonna make those. Let me show you how I make them. Like the recipe suggests, this is a sourdough recipe, so make sure your sourdough starter is fed, active, and really bubbly for this recipe. It's also really handy to do it in the stand mixer, which is why we're in the pantry this evening, mixing it up in here, but you could also mix by hand, it'll just take longer. So getting right into it, let's get the stand mixer all ready to go. Lock it into place there. I am making a big batch of these because they are really delicious and better to have too many than not enough. So first thing we need in the stand mixer is our flour. We need 6 cups of all-purpose flour. My flour is sitting right here on the floor. I brought the big bulk flour up from the basement for this project. So let's get this open. We buy our flour in bulk and keep it in big buckets in the basement, and then we will fill it up into smaller containers for everyday use. But as you can see, my flour container is empty at the moment. So rather than fill up that container, I just figured since I'm using a lot for this recipe, I'd scoop out of here for this evening, and then we'll go through and fill that up later. So first thing is 6 cups of all-purpose flour. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And I'm just putting everything for this recipe straight into the stand mixer because we will mix it up with that. Pretzel rolls are probably one of my favorite rolls of the moment. They are fluffy and soft, and they still have that really pillowy texture that you expect out of a roll. So they're still great with apple butter or just plain butter and your jams and jellies. You can treat them just like a normal roll. They just have that extra step of treating them in the water before you bake them, which we'll get to that tomorrow after these rise. For now, let's just mix up the dough. So in here we have 6 cups of all-purpose flour. Next thing to add to the flour is salt. We need 4 teaspoons of salt. I could not find my teaspoon measure, so I'm using a half a teaspoon. So you'll see me scoop out 8 scoops. It's not 8 teaspoons of salt, it's only 4 teaspoons of salt. I just have to double it up because I have the half teaspoon. So 4 teaspoons of salt. This is pink Himalayan sea salt, but any salt works. I will say the salt that you sprinkle on the top, I am a little picky about that part, but we'll get to that part tomorrow. So 4 teaspoons of salt. I need to do 8 halves. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, there's our 8 teaspoons. Sorry. See, I'm even making myself confused. It's 4 teaspoons. 8 half a teaspoons. That's what I scooped. Then you also need some butter. This is half a cup or 1 stick. And this is salted butter. You want this to be really, really soft so it incorporates really well into the dough. Definitely want this to be fully soft and at room temperature. Do not put hard butter or melted butter into this recipe. Make it soft. Before we do that, I like to use my dough hook so I don't have to dirty any other thing, and kind of give the salt just a little mix into the flour so that it's incorporated a little better. Okay, then we'll put the butter in here. And I'm gonna use my half teaspoon to scrape off all the extra. Make sure we have all that in there. Then we need some sugar. We need 4 teaspoons of sugar, or 8 half teaspoons, since that's what I'm scooping. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Then you need to put in your sourdough starter. This is my sourdough starter. I fed it yesterday and I fed it the day before. I normally keep it in the fridge, but I pulled it out. It's at room temperature and super active and bubbly. See, if I squish it down, it will deflate some, but it's just got lots and lots of bubbles. Very happy. If you are unsure if your sourdough starter is ready to use for this recipe, you can do what's called the float test. You can see those big bubbles forming up there. The float test is where you take a glass of water, a clear container, doesn't have to be a glass, and you take a little bit of your sourdough starter, put it in the water, and if the sourdough starter floats, it's ready to use. It's super active and light and bubbly, and if it sinks, you just need to feed it and give it some more time before you use it. Basic sourdough principle. But we need 1 full cup of this sourdough starter for our mixture here, for our pretzel rolls. I like to stir my sourdough starter a little bit, just to make sure it's a little bit deflated before adding it in. I don't know, that's just normally what I do. So I put it in the cup, and mine's so bubbly that I typically have to like pop those bubbles to make sure I'm getting a full cup, because it'll deflate a little bit. My sourdough starter's over 100 years old though, so I don't normally have a problem with it being active and bubbly. It's normally pretty ready to get going. Okay, so there's my full cup of sourdough starter. Scrape that out and put that in there. Okay. The next ingredient we need is 2 cups of warm water. My water looks so cloudy. That's kind of funny. We have a well, so sometimes the extra minerals in the water and the aeration just kind of make it look cloudy. See, it's cleared up already. Oh, you can magnify my brain. It's late at night. My brain sometimes just goes. Thanks for sticking with me though and watching today's video. So 2 cups of warm, but not hot, water for our sourdough pretzel roll mixture. All right, we're pouring all that into there, and then we're gonna mix it all together. You can see everything is in there. I'm gonna raise up my stand mixer, and I have the dough hook attachment, and we're gonna have it on setting 1 for about, 10 minutes or so. Sometimes it takes a little longer than that. There we go. So we're gonna let this run for 10 minutes. And it'll come together and form a dough ball. Different sourdough starters could have a slightly different hydration level than others. So when you're making any sourdough recipe, really you need to look at what the dough actually looks like and go off of that versus going off what the recipe says exactly. So I've been kneading my dough mixture. I'll show you what it looks like. And because of the way it looks right now, I know it needs a little bit more flour. So right here, when I turn it on, you see how it's still sticking all to the bottom and it's not coming together to form a big ball. I need to add just a little bit more flour. Normally for me, it only takes 1 or 2 tablespoons extra flour to make sure that the dough comes together completely. I'll show you what the dough should look like when you're finished here in just a second, so you know what you're aiming for. And just add flour in small increments. You can always add more, you can't take away any. So this is what our dough should look like. See how it's nice and smooth? Oh, I have flour all over my hands. If you take a little pinch of it, you should be able to perform what's called the window pane test, where you stretch it and you should be able to see through it. Hold on, I need 2 hands. So the window pane test is where you take a little bit of the dough and you stretch it out, and you should be able to pull it without it breaking in the center. It's breaking down there in the corner, but that's okay. And it's translucent and light is able to pass through, and I've read that you should be able to read a newspaper through it. Typically, as long as it stretches and you can see light through it, you're good. I don't typically pull out a newspaper and try to read it. Not that many people have old-fashioned newspapers these days anyway, but this is how your dough should look. It should be smooth and round, no like webbing on it. I ended up actually kneading it in the stand mixer for about 25 minutes. I did have to add about 2 extra tablespoons of flour, and now it's good to go. We're gonna lightly oil this bowl, cover it with plastic wrap, and let it sit at room temperature for about 12 hours, and we'll do the next step. I like to kind of move the dough out of the way and pour just the tiniest little bit of oil underneath it. And then kind of choose my hand to spread the oil around. I always keep it in the same bowl. I don't ever get a clean bowl. That might not be proper, but that's honestly what I do. So I just spin it around so that it's coated in oil on all sides, and kind of wipe some of the oil up the sides of the bowl. And then we're just gonna wrap it in plastic to let it rise for the next 12 hours. I'm making this at night, so it's rising overnight for me. It's the next day. The pretzel roll dough has doubled in size overnight. It's not a dramatic doubling, but it is definitely puffed up and filled out the bowl a little more. Now we're gonna make the actual rolls themselves. Before I start making the rolls, I like to prep my workspace. You'll need about 2, sometimes more than that, trays, and line them with parchment paper. So we need some trays, and we're gonna line them with parchment paper to put our shaped rolls onto. And I'm just gonna set these over to the side while we divide up all of our dough into the individual rolls. I like to use a kitchen scale when I make rolls so that they're all uniform in size. I go by weight. I like to put the whole bowl of dough onto the scale and zero it out. Then I pick up a section of the dough and kind of figure out what size I want the bun to make, and then I go based off of that. So that's like a pretty good size because it will double in size. So I think I'm gonna make them a little smaller. So for instance, this dough right here, it will double in size after the second proofing. So you need to take that into account when you're shaping your rolls. So pick what size you want. I'm going with 88 grams. So this is 88 grams.
Then after you determine your size, you just tear off the scale, taking it back to 0 before grabbing each new roll of dough.
If I was being more accurate, I would have weighed out all the dough beforehand and then divided it into how many rolls I wanted to make so that each one was the exact same. To shape the dough and to actually make it the tight rolls that we want, I have just my clean countertop here and my hand. That's all you need. I like to take the dough in my hand and kind of form it first. This is just the method I do. Pinching it all together here at the bottom, like that. Kind of just bringing it up into a pinch point. And then I put it on the counter, put my hand over it in kind of like a dome and do a tight roll. And you just roll it back and forth. You don't need any extra flour, just a clean countertop. And the tension of your hand being on it will shape it into a perfect little ball. Then we're gonna put that onto our cookie sheet. Move this out of the way. We'll put that onto the cookie sheet. So again, just to reiterate, we're bringing it up, kind of like folding over the sides and pinching it up, almost like you're making a little dumpling. But then I like to put the seam side down on the counter, take my hand in a claw shape and have it just in the palm of my hand here and rolling it together. And I do this for, I don't know, 20 seconds or so. You'll kind of get a feel for what it's supposed to feel like under your hand when it's gone smooth and gotten tighter. And we're just going to repeat that process. I'm very excited for these rolls. They're going to be so good. The tighter you make these buns as you're rolling them, the better they turn out. You don't want to just keep them this loose, wonky shape because then they will be uneven as they're cooking. And if they're uneven as they're cooking, you'll get some spots that are more burnt around the edges than others. So I do really like to shape them and make them even. And by weighing them out, you're ensuring that they all cook at the same rate and are all evenly cooked. None of them are overcooked and burnt, or some are a little doughy. It just makes everything a little bit more uniform. And it's kind of fun to do. It feels like you're playing with Play-Doh. So yeah, it's just a smooth, round roll. There's something very therapeutic about making bread. I feel like it's just adult Play-Doh. And you should be having fun when you're baking, because if you're not, then you're doing something wrong. So I think I'm just gonna do 6 per tray. So I might need a couple more trays here. And then I'm gonna reuse this plastic wrap that was over the top of the bowl. And we'll cover each of the trays. And these should take probably about 2 hours to proof for the second rise. It depends on the temperature of your house though. So take a good snapshot in your mind of what they look like when you start, and you want them to be double in size. If you have a warm spot in your house, that really does help with them rising. I often put them by the stove because that's typically the warmest area. Or sometimes I will turn my stove on to like 100 degrees, 70 degrees, somewhere in that range, and let them proof in there. It also helps maybe if you like put them on top of your dryer. I've done that. I used to do that at my old house, and let them proof there because the dryer does emit heat. Just keep that in mind. They will rise and proof still. If your house is cold, it just may take longer. So let's finish rolling all these out. Or shaping them, I should say. Making pretzel rolls. This is also a fun thing to get the kids involved in. My kids often like to help me divide them into their correct amounts so that they're all evenly shaped. There's another one. You do want to make sure you're leaving space between the rolls, because as they rise, they will get bigger, like I mentioned. And if they're really close together, they'll like grow into each other and you might lose your perfectly round domed shape. And you're kind of going in a tight circle. Like I'm moving it in a circle. I guess it does come into my hands, my fingers a little bit, not just the palm. But you don't want to smush it down. It's a very light touch. Hope that makes sense. Play around with it. You'll figure it out. Just gonna put it on the counter for now, and I'll get another tray in a minute. More, I don't know why I'm pulling out more parchment paper. I need plastic wrap. Here we go. Right container. I need more plastic wrap to put over the top of all these. You can also put a damp kitchen towel, that would work too. Just something to keep the air off of them and to help them rise a little faster. One more piece for our other tray. So in total we have, let's see, 6, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. We have 20 rolls. So we'll have 20 pretzel rolls. So we're just gonna let those proof on the counter at room temperature for about 2 hours, like I mentioned, until they have doubled in size. It could take longer than 2 hours if your house is cold. My house is a little bit cold today, so it may take longer than 2 hours. I'll update you on how long it took when we get to that point. For now, they're all sitting right here, neatly on the counter. Our pretzel rolls have proofed, and now we're ready to boil them. You boil pretzel rolls before you bake them in the oven. I have 4 quarts of boiling water going on the stove right now. And now that it's boiling, we're gonna add some baking soda. We're gonna add 1 big heaping cup of baking soda to our boiling water. And this is what gives the bread that signature pretzel taste. We buy the really big bags of baking soda. So it's heaping. You can be generous with this. Ooh, splashed myself a little bit. Then we are gonna boil these pretzel rolls for 2 minutes per side. So we're gonna boil them for 2 minutes and then flip them over, boil them for 2 minutes on the next side. And I like to use this, I don't know what it's called, ladle that has the grates in it. I feel like it just makes it easier to get them out. And be very gentle when you're putting these in so you don't burn yourself. They will float. So let me get them in here. Then I'll set my 2-minute timer. We're doing 1 tray at a time, and I'm gonna set a 2-minute timer, and we will flip them after the 2 minutes is up.
My timer has gone off, and now it is time to flip over all of these pretzel rolls. I like to be kind of gentle with this. I don't want any of them to flip on top of one another. And I think this also just kind of helps them keep their shape if you do it gently. But as you can see, some of them are still touching and it all works out. You don't have to be too terribly particular, but we are going to set another timer for 2 more minutes and then we will pull them out and do the next batch.
They've boiled for 2 minutes on each side. Now we're gonna scoop these out, kind of let the water drip dry off of them, and place them over on our baking sheet again.
When I am putting these back on the tray, I am trying to have them be evenly spaced because we will bake them on the same tray.
After we get this next batch going in the water, I'll show you what we do next to the pretzel rolls. Set our timer for 2 more minutes. Now let's go over here to our rolls. So I want to slide them over so that they are evenly spaced on the tray. A little better. Then using a really sharp knife, I like to use a fillet knife. I feel like it's the sharpest. You want to create a slit on the top. The X cut that is very traditional with pretzel rolls. And our oven is preheated to 425 degrees. We're gonna bake these here in just a second. On the top of our pretzel rolls, I like to do this salty flaked sea salt. Any chunky flaked sea salt works. You just want to make sure it is a coarser, bigger chunk because that will withstand the baking and you'll still get that crunch. So we're going to put this on top of all of our freshly X'd pretzel rolls. Then we're going to bake these for 20 to 30 minutes. It just depends on how big you made your rolls for how long they bake. Check them. Oh, there's my timer. Let's flip these real quick. We're going to bake these rolls for 20 to 30 minutes at 425 degrees Fahrenheit. How long you bake them kind of depends on how big you made them. If you have an internal thermometer, I have this one linked to my Amazon storefront, you can check the internal temperature and you want it to be 190 degrees Fahrenheit. That'll give you the perfect consistency and it'll be perfectly done. Sometimes it's kind of hard with bread to know exactly when it's done, especially pretzel rolls because they do get kind of dark. So let's put these in the oven.
The first batch has just now come out of the oven. They smell so good. I wish you guys could smell them. I have several different batches going because I have each tray. This is quite a large recipe, and trust me, you're going to want to eat every single one of these rolls. So you will be thankful that there are so many trays of them.
Here is what our final sourdough pretzel rolls look like. They are still really hot, so I'm trying not to burn my fingers, but I just wanted to show you guys the finished result. By giving it the slit, that's what causes that white crack there in the middle, and you can see the flaky sea salt still on top. All right, let's break this bad boy open. See if I can do it without burning my fingers. All right, there we go, nice and steamy and hot on the inside. They're so good. All right, I have to just eat that little flaky, crusty part. I love these things. They're delicious. Give this recipe a try. If you do, let me know in the comments how you like it. Hope y'all have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye, y'all.